In our last video, we spoke about the importance of parents working together when they have a child with autism, even if those parents are separated or divorced. And some parents are able to do this, placing the best emotional interests of the child, the physical needs of the child, all of the needs of the child first and foremost on their list. And notwithstanding whatever happened in the past, they are able to work together. Other couples, however, following separation or divorce are either unable or unwilling to have any type of working relationship after the fact. And so when this happens, and there could be good reasons why they don't want to have a relationship, but the reality is when you have parents who could have a relationship, a functional relationship, but don't, and they have a child with autism or other special needs, it could make things harder on the child for a lot of different reasons. And the main reason is because a lot of time and money and energy is going into some type of dispute between the parents having something to do with the child, but it does not involve the parents working together. So each case is its own entity. And there are cases, obviously, where parents cannot work together. For example, if there's a domestic violence restraining order and they're not allowed to have contact with each other, obviously their ability to work together would be not the same as a couple where domestic violence was not an issue. But let's take hypothetically a hypothetical couple where there's not domestic violence, where they just grew apart, they have separate lives, they are separating or divorcing, or are already divorced, but they have a child with autism. So, what types of disputes tend to come up? And again, every case is different, but in my years of experience, I can tell you that some issues seem to come up repeatedly between parents of a child with autism. So, for example, there are disputes concerning the child's diagnosis. Sometimes you have a party who is getting divorced, they're a parent, and they want to have the child tested for autism because they believe, based upon what they've observed, and some of the symptoms and some of their self education, that the child might be on the autism spectrum, and the other parent does not want the child even diagnosed for whatever particular reason. So there could be disputes between parties as to that, as to whether the child even has autism or not. If a child has autism spectrum disorder, most studies seem to indicate that the earlier you get the diagnosis and the earlier you start the intense intervention, the better the chance is to have more mainstream success down the line in many cases. Not in every case, but in some cases. So the issue as far as diagnosis sometimes comes up between parties. And once you have the diagnosis, there could be a dispute between the parties, separated or divorced parties, as to what type of plan there will be, what type of intervention. How often will therapies take place? Will there be behavioral therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy? Is what the school district is offering, is that sufficient? Is what the school is suggesting insufficient? Is there going to be a challenge to what the school district is recommending, the child study team? There could be disputes between the parties, even if they agree on the plan of intervention, whether the child is succeeding in that plan or not. Sometimes a child starts off and they're doing reasonably well under a plan, and then they're not doing so well. And then you have to make some adjustments. That doesn't necessarily mean you get rid of the whole plan, but it's constantly watching, observing, adjusting, learning, and moving forward. Sometimes there are disputes between separating or divorcing parents as to custody of a child with autism spectrum disorder. We're going to talk about that a little bit further on the next video. But custody can be an issue in dispute between the parties. Parenting time can be an issue, even if there's an agreement concerning who will be, for example, the residential or physical custodian of the child, the primary physical custodian of the child. There could still be ongoing issues concerning what the parenting schedule will be, who gets the child on Mondays versus Thursdays versus certain holidays, that type of thing. There could be disputes between the parties concerning school-related issues. As I referenced earlier, sometimes a child study team is involved. If you have a child who's receiving special education services, there could be multiple individuals on that child study team. And sometimes parents agree with some people on the child study team, but not others. And sometimes the parents don't agree between themselves. One parent agrees with what the school is saying and the other parent does not. There could be issues between the parents as far as which school a child is going to attend. Sometimes a child is eligible for more than one school. Sometimes there's a private school option. Sometimes if the parents are living in two different school districts, one district may provide superior special education services, which may be a benefit to the child, that type of thing. There could be disputes concerning relocation. If one parent wants to move out of the jurisdiction, for example, wants to move to another state, that could create obviously issues between the parents, although sometimes those issues can be resolved as well. There could be disputes or issues between the parties concerning financial obligations, base child support, or special autism related expenses in excess of child support. Sometimes, depending on the child's needs, there are extra expenses on a recurring basis that have to be considered when you're talking about what each side should contribute based upon their financial ability to contribute, their ability to pay, the child's needs, and the basis for the additional expense if you're talking about an autism related expense. So, for example, sometimes you have expenses that are not covered, for example, by the school district's program or by insurance, and it's out of pocket. And sometimes this creates an issue between the parents. There could be issues on other financial subjects in a divorce, such as, for example, spousal support or alimony. So, for example, if a parent cannot work full time because they have caretaking responsibilities for the child with special needs, let's say the child is young in this hypothetical, that could impact not only child support but alimony in a jurisdiction that recognizes alimony. Division of marital assets and debts. Different states have different rules. Some states are what are called community property states. Other states are what are called equitable distribution states. It's important to know the law of the state you're in concerning division of assets and debts or distribution of marital assets and debts. But regardless of which state you're in, the issue of how to divide up assets and debts sometimes becomes a issue of contention between parties who are in the midst of a litigious divorce, a contentious divorce. As a child gets older and perhaps is doing well enough to graduate from high school, but still is on the spectrum, there could be issues concerning what happens after high school. Is the child going to go on to college? Is the child going to go to technical school? Is the child going to go to some service-related entity? And so these things have to be discussed as well, because sometimes when people get divorced, they have a teenager or young adult child with autism, and there's a whole bunch of other issues that have to be considered once you have extended beyond high school or general public school. There could be other issues, obviously, besides the ones I referenced, but these tend to be the ones which surface, at least in my experience, frequently. And no matter what the issue is, if two parents keep in mind that it is generally in a child's interest for the parents to try to resolve issues, either directly or if they're not allowed to communicate with each other through attorneys, whatever the case may be, so that the case can move forward and that you're not spending too much time and money and negative energies in court fighting with each other, but actually working in some kind of constructive manner consistent with the best interests of the child.